Watch this.
An almost complete abortion ban has been in the works for years in Idaho's legislature. Well, they got one this year, and it immediately went to court. Lawmakers, though, wanted a more active role in seeing it through, and they got it. Idaho's Attorney General has been pretty active when it comes to offering opinions of Idaho's recent laws. It's been kind of a contentious relationship, and one discussed during this election season's first debate. Wednesdays and weekends were once happening at this horse racing hotspot, but it's been empty for years, and Ada County commissioners are hoping to make this riverfront property hot again. Planned Parenthood's lawsuit against Idaho's recently adopted abortion ban doesn't have a date set yet with the state Supreme Court, but when it does, well, the state of Idaho is going to have a few more lawyers sitting at their table. Yesterday, Idaho's Supreme Court approved state lawmakers' request to intervene in the case, meaning they'll have a more direct involvement, allowing the lawmakers' private attorneys to participate in hearings, make oral arguments, be part of the defense team, arguing the case right alongside the state attorneys. The motion was filed by House Speaker Scott Bedke, Senate President Pro Tem Chuck Winder, on behalf of the legislature. The law in question is the Texas-style abortion ban, making any abortion after 6 weeks illegal, and it would allow families of the woman to sue an abortion provider for at least $20,000. The law was supposed to go into effect in 2 days, on Friday, but after Planned Parenthood of Idaho filed the lawsuit, a judge temporarily blocked it. So the question of the law's constitutionality is at the center of the lawsuit. It's a question posed by both Idaho's Attorney General and Governor, and whose opinions were pointed out by Planned Parenthood when they filed the lawsuit. Back in February, when Senate Bill 1309 was working its way through the legislature, Senator Grant Burgoyne asked the Attorney General's office for an opinion on it, specifically if 1309 violated the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. and Idaho constitutions. The 9-page opinion said this: should a court adjudicate a challenge to the law on the merits of the restriction on abortions, well, it would likely be found unconstitutional. And with regard to the enforcement clause, under the proposed legislation, the legislature arguably would be stripping the executive branch of its constitutional charge in violation of the constitutional separation of powers. The bill passed through both chambers with a veto-proof majority very easily. Then a month ago, when Governor Little signed it into law, he did so with this caveat: while I support the pro-life policy in this legislation, I fear the novel civil enforcement mechanism will be, in short order, proven both unconstitutional and unwise. A week later, Planned Parenthood filed their lawsuit. Earlier this month, the Roman Catholic Church of Idaho asked to intervene, but that request was rejected. However, Idaho's lawmakers asked and was granted. We asked Senator Chuck Winder today why they wanted to be involved in this lawsuit. And he told us it's an important law and it's an important lawsuit. And yes, this is normally the AG's job to defend Idaho's laws, but they wanted to make sure they had the best legal minds working together.
We just felt like there are times when the legislature needs to be more directly involved, because we are the makers of the law, that we be able to really bring a case and bring the presentation that the legislature feels is appropriate.
Does that have anything to do with the fact that the AG's opinion of this law plus what the governor wrote in signing this law, do you feel like there was a conflict there between the legislative and the executive branch when it comes to this bill and this law?
I don't personally think there was or is, even as we go forward. I think, all parties were kind of stating their best positions on it. I think the Attorney General, in their opinion, was taken into consideration with the final bill that was drafted and passed and signed into law. And the governor has a right to veto a bill. He chose not to do that. He obviously is supportive of pro-life positions. And so I think this is one of those cases where we have a chance to all work together and to try and bring this case to a successful conclusion against Planned Parenthood.
What do you say then to people who say, well, isn't this what we pay the Attorney General's office to do, is to defend these cases?
Well, of course they do, and they will defend it, and they'll defend it with the best people they have. But I also think that sometimes in the case where we get into real specific law that doesn't occur that often, it's good to have outside counsel.
It just so happens this past legislative session, lawmakers passed and Governor Little signed a bill that would make it easier for the legislature to intervene and bring private counsel in cases involving the constitutionality of Idaho's laws. Senator Winder told us they hired Danny Bauer and Monty Stewart with the law firm Stewart, Taylor, and Morris, and they will be paid through the Constitutional Defense Fund and the Legislative Legal Defense Fund, both of which lawmakers reload every legislative session with millions of dollars. Still, no court date set with the Idaho Supreme Court.
I have some clients that don't want to receive good legal advice, and they choose not to, and it costs the state dearly.
Well, that lawsuit, and the relationship between the legislature and the AG's office were all brought up in last night's debate between Republican candidates for the state's attorney job. Incumbent Lawrence Wasden, who you just heard from, summed up what he has seen over the last 2 decades in office, specifically the last few years. The 3 candidates from last night, the trial lawyer and former Congressman Raul Labrador, who ran unsuccessfully for governor in 2018, Art McAmber, North Idaho real estate property rights attorney, and incumbent Wasden, the longest-serving AG in state history, running for his 6th term. When asked about that relationship between the AG's office and the legislature, here's what he said.
There should be a mutual respect. However, the legislature is the legislative branch of government. The Attorney General is in the executive branch of government. There's checks and balances on each side. It's not going to be a perfect relationship, nor should it be. My function under the law is to give them legal advice, and it is also to help them to try and improve their legislation, which we do. But you're going to have a certain number of them that simply don't want to receive that advice, and they get to make the policy choices. I'm not telling them what they get to choose. I'm giving them legal advice. They choose that, and then I represent the policy choices once they make them.
Wasden mentioned on one occasion he had a legislator who told him, "We can do anything we want because we're the Idaho legislature," to which Wasden had to remind them, "No, actually you can't. You're limited by the Constitution." Meanwhile, Labrador says while it may not always be a friendly relationship, as AG, he hopes to have a better working one with the legislature.
So we have 2 problems with what the Attorney General just said. Number one is that he keeps blaming his client. The worst kind of lawyer is the lawyer that keeps blaming his clients for the bad relationship or blames the client for the cases that they lose. I think they have a problem because he keeps talking down to the legislature instead of talking with the legislature and working with them. But the number one issue that we have, and I noticed this when I was a legislator, was I couldn't believe that the Attorney General's office was actually giving legal counsel to the legislature and the legislative branch. I actually think that the legislative branch should have its own attorneys. But the best thing that an attorney general can do is ensure that whatever the legislature passes is written in a way that can be defended in the courts.
To which Wasden said they do through the opinions that they are asked of during the session. Well, Labrador said if you have an attorney general that is trusted by the legislature, well, they'll usually and actually follow the counsel instead of constantly butting heads, pointing to the fact lawmakers did try to take away some of the AG office funding because of that animosity. McCumber said the fundamental problem with the relationship is the problem with the separation of powers.
You have a conflict of interest when the legislature goes next door to the executive branch. These branches are having adversarial relationships. That's the way the republics are designed. I will measure what the legislative burden is in the Attorney General's office, and I will fire those attorneys and take those positions and put them back in the legislature, work with the legislature to create a legal counsel's office for the legislature. That's what they need.
Okay, so that was just a part of the hour-long debate that went on last night on IPTV. Let's bring in Morgan Romero now, who you were on the panel for the debates last night.
I was one of 3 reporters on that panel. I have to admit it was a fun, interesting debate, maybe not to be expected of an attorney general debate, but it really was. Brian, because they're all attorneys, they were relatively well behaved. We'll give them that. This was really a debate between, the establishment, another political insider, and an outsider. That was brought up quite a bit. All candidates call themselves constitutionalist conservatives, but of course they did go at it over a number of different things.
Okay, so we heard what they talked about at length, that relationship between the AG's office and the legislature. There was another point right after that. I believe you brought it up. What about that relationship between the AG in the governor's office.
We did ask specifically about that. You know, Macomber and Labrador criticized Wasden for sort of always siding with or agreeing with Governor Little, specifically during the pandemic and when Little exercised those emergency powers. So I asked Wasden, you know, are you willing to push back on Governor Little if he gets reelected? His answer was he does have a difference of opinion with the governor. You know, he cited the land board, for example, both of them on that. He said when Little asks him to be his lawyer, though, it's his job and responsibility to represent the governor and argue in his defense. Otherwise, he violates the law. He says that's how it works with any attorney and client. The client decides whether or not to take your legal advice, and then you represent them in court if and when they get sued, right? Laid out in the state constitution, the attorney general's job is to legally represent several state agencies and offices, not just the governor. And given the fact that both Labrador and Macomber are critical of Little, I asked them if they'd be able to work with him if he gets reelected. They said yes, they have to be cordial with all state officers, but the candidates did say that they'd push back against Little more than Wasden is, and that they'd stand up, you know, to any executive branch overreach.
This idea of putting attorneys in the legislature to offer these opinions kind of, I guess, as things are happening, something that Macomber said hasn't been in effect since 1997. So that's something that I think we're going to kind of look into ourselves. But
that is interesting.
What about this federal government overreach kind of thing that also was brought up a couple of times?
Essentially, they said they don't believe Wasden has been aggressive enough in standing up to federal government overreach. They think he's too passive in defending Idaho's sovereignty. Wasden argued he files lawsuits against the federal government, we cover them here at KTVB, when he has a legitimate cause of action. And that, of course, is weighing the facts and weighing the law. Take a listen.
You don't join lawsuits simply because you want to gain political popularity or have your face on Fox News. You have to have a proper cause of action to bring. We join when we have a cause of action. We sue the federal government. I sued the federal government over vaccine mandates. I've sued the government repeatedly.
Wasden says he reads the Constitution and he does what it says, even when it's not politically popular. Of course, we couldn't get to all the questions we wanted to ask since the debate was just an hour. I do wish, Brian, that we could have asked Wasden. One of our follow-up questions was, what if McGeehan gets elected? Would he be willing to work with her, given the fact that she's accused his office of giving bad advice in the past?
And his answer, or you would like to ask that question?
I want to ask that.
That would have been an interesting question to answer, yes.
If we're able to have the attorney general candidates on in some format on KTVB, because we're not doing that AG debate, we'd love to ask those questions.
Speaking of questions, I'd like to ask you about Ro Labrador. He's been kind of in the background since 2019 when he left his spot in U.S. Congress. He was the head of the Idaho GOP. Then he's now and currently on the CDH board, Central District Health Board.
Right.
Some people kind of accusing him like this is kind of a stepping stone thing for him.
That was actually one of our first questions as panelists was why you? You know, you ask these candidates, why you? Why do you really want this job, Congressman Labrador? And he said, you know, he believes he's the best person for the job and kind of gave his campaign speech in that way. But to your point, he left Congress, you know, served in the Idaho GOP, is a practicing trial attorney for Skog Law out in Nampa. And I think that is on a lot of people's minds. He ran an unsuccessful race for governor. So is this just the next step because he's an attorney? Is this the next step? And he says no.
Like he has higher goals other than attorney general.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Is this the stepping stone to reach governor at some point in the future? And I mean, we'll see, but he said no.
All right. Thank you very much, Morgan. And speaking of we'll see, KTVB, we're going to host our first debate coming up on Tuesday night, Republican candidates for state superintendent. You can watch that starting at 6 o'clock right here on Channel 7 and KTVB.com. Thanks, Morgan.
You bet.
Great views, lots of open space, prime location. Ada County Commissioners are trying to entice the right tenant to the old turf club in Garden City. All right, now's the time to grab your phone and type in this number, 208-321-5614. Then type us a message. Send us your questions, your comments, or pretty much anything about the show. Just make sure you include your name and the hashtag #the208. Want us to share yours at the end of the show? Tell you what, keep it concise, keep it clean, and clever helps, and you might see yours. Some of us are old enough to remember Ladies' Night at LeBois Park, those Wednesdays in the summer when that place was packed. Those crowds would sometimes migrate to the Turf Club, where serious horse racing fans could play the ponies. And there you could bet on simulcasted races coming in from all across the country. Well, horse racing ended at LeBois in 2015. Shortly after, in 2018, the Turf Club closed. Since then, that building has been sitting empty. But now Ada County is hoping to fill it. Not with the Sport of Kings, but maybe the next best thing or the next best business to lease it. Here's Katya Stepovic.
Located in unincorporated Ada County sits this vacant turf club built in 1985. It once welcomed horses, bettors, gamblers, and entertainment seekers throughout the state.
It's a little disheartening. I have been a horse racing fan. I grew up in the horse racing business along with the fair business, and so it was a sad day.
Horse racing and simulcasting at LeBois and the Turf Club ended in 2015 after the Idaho legislature repealed the law that authorized historical horse racing machines.
It was a ban on historical racing machines, which were races that were previously run, put into a machine in their database that you didn't know where it was from, who the jockey was, or who won the race, and you could bet on that type of system. They also, at the same time, had simulcast racing, which was the pari-mutuel racing that you could get a live signal from other places that did live horse racing. You could place your wagers on them at that time.
But now Ada County is looking to bring back some life to the two-level facility home to 12,495 square feet of empty space.
We just don't like to let buildings sit vacant. They deteriorate 7 times faster than if they're being used. This is the upper side here.
So today, several interested leasers toured the facility and all it has to offer.
I loved going upstairs and the view was amazing.
Patty from Facilitech AI says after seeing the building, she's excited about what the future of these walls could hold.
We want to come up with a solution that's multi-purpose and potentially a co-working space, possibly partnering with someone in town just to make that happen. A place where the community can come for events and training and activities as well.
This is the kitchen.
So she's thinking it could be a perfect multi-use workspace down below and an event space to take in the view up top.
I think it's a pretty innovative approach that we have that really tries to include a lot of different opportunities and a lot of different business styles and types, especially catering to small business.
It's just the location and the availability of some parking, and you know, you just got to have an imagination to think of what you could do with this building.
And those interested in potentially leasing the space have the ability to apply until May 2nd. I asked how much monthly rent would be, and that is yet to be determined. Brian.
All right, Katya, I know that Ada County has big plans for this space overall because that's a big property and they're looking to renovate it, turn it. They have all kinds of ideas, 3 big ones. So I guess my question is are those future plans involved with this building? I mean, how long could this lease last, I guess?
Well, it's still kind of to be determined. We don't know the length of the lease specifically, but from what I picked up on today, they don't really want to see the building go in itself. And then there's that floodplain right in front of it that you can't physically build on. So it doesn't look like it's going to go away anytime soon, that area as a whole.
And we're expecting to see some of those changes on those big plans starting sometime soon, I guess this summer, I think, is how that's going to play out. All right, thank you very much, Katya. All right, one thing we've learned in the Gem State is no matter where you live in Idaho, you're likely going to run into some rush hour traffic. It just may look a little differently depending on where you drive, especially this time of year as the weather starts to warm up, wildlife start to head back up into the mountains. Well, a group of rams made quite the scene last week on a 2-lane mountain road. Amy Bingham Sinclair says she was on her way to work Friday and saw this So Idaho picture right in front of her. She's driving Salmon River Road about 7 miles upriver from Riggins when she ran into this traffic jam. She posted pictures on Facebook with the caption, "Sorry, I was late to work. There was a ram jam." And as you can see, quite literally there was ram jam indeed. What is this? Yep, that was part of the picture. You see, they're big orange sheep, so they're kind of, well, horny. Anyway, sounds like there may be even more traffic coming on that road in, well, probably about 5 months or so. All right, your reminder that we're not just on your television, we're also on your laptop, on your computer, and on your social media networks. You can connect with us at any time of the day. Facebook, Instagram, we got Twitter as well. We are everywhere. Feel free to send us an email or even leave us a voicemail because, you know, those are fun. And if you missed any of our 208 shows, as I mentioned, you can watch them all in their entirety at KTVB's YouTube page. All right, final moments of the show. Let's get to your comments about the topics we talked about today, like this one. I don't agree with abortion. However, I don't think a bunch of old white guys, or women as it were, in the State House should be making that choice for everyone else, says Jim in Boise. How about having lawmakers pay us back when they pass laws they know to be unconstitutional, and then spend our money to defend what they know to be unconstitutional and lose, says Larry. A lot of people had that sentiment, Larry. Note to the Idaho legislature, your ego is passing laws you try to enforce on the taxpayer money, but you are now on notice, says Bill. After all, there's an election coming up, so if you have any qualms with anybody that is in the State House, that's where you settle that, I guess. Who's paying for these private attorneys in regards to the abortion law, asked Kim and Nampa. We talked about this. It's the Legislative Legal Defense Fund and the Constitutional Defense Fund. Both of these funds are filled by the lawmakers every legislative session. I think millions of dollars are put into these every year. So it's one of those things where, well, it comes out of your pocket, basically. With the Turf Club, it would be a nice start overlooking a baseball field if it would be allowed, reasonable access and plenty of parking, says Dan. Isn't there one just like a baseball throw away, like a throw from right field to home plate? It's that close. If they're going to move the baseball field, they probably want to move it to someplace, I don't know, maybe a little bit further away. They have other plans for that space. We'll see you back here tomorrow.